Hi everyone, this is Ben with a layout tour today that's been a long time in the making. I was editing this one in the spring of 2020 when life as we all know it changed, and then I ended up moving out of state and all my priorities shifted. But I hope you'll find the wait worth it. This is Richard Heisler's Incredible Garden Railroad, a true model railroad that just happens to be outdoors. Also, if you want to see more garden railroads, next year Sacramento is hosting the National Garden Railroad Convention, June 18 to 21, and you can register for that at ngrc2025.org. But back to this video. It is a longer interview than my others, but I hope you'll find it worth it. I've learned so much, and it's been such an inspiration as I'm planning my next railroad. I really hope that you'll enjoy it as well.
All right, we are here today at the home of Richard Heisler. We're about to check out his garden railroad. Let's go take a look. Thanks for hosting us and having us come by.
We moved in here in 2008, and by 2010 it was up and running and pretty much complete as far as the track goes. But it took a lot longer to do the buildings and details, and then I realized I wanted to have I needed a place to steam up my locomotives. So I built this here, and then hung the railroad on the fence. Looks like we're hot.
Oh, we're boiling. You can do it.
This railroad is kind of an amalgam of a lot of ideas that I've learned from the local history. And one time there was a railroad that the locals got together as sort of trying to break the Southern Pacific monopoly, and it ran through Woodbridge and Lodi to the east up to Valley Springs, and to the west out to a landing on the Mokelumne River. And but there were other railroads around here too. There's still the Central California Traction that started off as a 42-inch gauge street railway, and it's now a feeder for the two major railroads. And we've got Amtrak and ACE, Commuter Express, and another short line, the Stockton Terminal and Eastern, and this was quite a railroad hub for 100 years pretty much. Wow. Anyway, so this is a narrow gauge railroad, 42-inch gauge. It started off theoretically as a street railway and connecting Lodi and Woodbridge, and then worked its way out into the countryside. And it's the main crop, so you can see we have a string of cars there. Looks like the grape harvest is coming in, and we also have the sugar beet campaign, the sugar refineries at the other end, which we'll see later. The sugar refinery now owns the railroad because it's the most lucrative part of the operation. So everything is sort of abbreviated. They're just little snippets. This is a sort of, might have been Lodi. It has an arch very similar to the Lodi arch, and a machine shop and a warehouse and a diner, and so forth. A lodge hall, the local barber, and the railroad then moves out into past the cemetery to Lodi Lake, which is on the Mokelumne River, a nice place to go on a hot summer day. And this is an irrigation canal that's connected to the lake. And then we're into the town of Woodbridge. And some of these things are displaced from other towns, but this is pretty typical. The winery, local store, the Roundhouse Tavern, which still exists in Lodi, and a couple other, typical things, gas station and so forth.
Nice.
And then as we start to head west, and we go out past Jesse's Grove, which is a fairly well-known winery, at least locally. It's out to the west. We're now heading out into the Delta, and we through the country, and we get to Brack's Landing, which is the original destination of the railroad. At least of the San Joaquin and Sierra Nevada, which is the prototype for it. And there are warehouses and crane for loading and unloading river boats. And Al's Place, it's a steak and cocktails place that's still doing business out in the town of Locke. Market is Higashi's Market. It's named after my wife's family.
Nice.
And
what year did you say?
This is like 35 to 40.
Okay.
Just before World War II, the Depression, toward the end, getting toward the end of the Depression. Nice thing about agriculture is that the demand continues for agriculture, no matter if people don't have money for anything else.
Yeah.
And Prohibition is now over, so the wineries are all on the up and up, and no more shipping grapes to the East Coast for people to make into their own wine. Then we continue to go west, across the Mokelumne River, and have a fisherman there and another aquatic denizen. Sharky's Slough, another fishing spot, a little closer to the ocean. Sometimes we get some salt water in there. And finally, the Delta Sugar Company. They once were doing making sugar from sugar cane down in Central America, but the political situation got sort of hot down there, so they bought into the sugar beet business, which was thriving at this time in California, among other places. And so the idea here is that the trains can come in and dump the sugar beets into the central area, and there's some empty cars over there on the siding. And the finished product is bagged and shipped out by rail also, and it can go out by river, or it can be transshipped to other railroads. And the power plant there, and so it's all. The plant is much bigger, but there's no room here to represent it all. This area is actually in a hanging sconce, like a sort of like a window box in reverse, hanging off the back. And almost everything that's everything that is planted on the railroad is a succulent of some sort. They come in many varieties. Some are like virtual ground covers, and others will grow into much larger plants if you don't trim them back. And every time something tries to sprout, it just gets trimmed off. And so we have these 3 pseudo palm trees, and then this is a plant that, if you're not a stickler for fine detail, makes an acceptable background forest. And we've got a couple sets of those. Mm-hmm. And then there's an asparagus fern down just at the side of the bridge. And that has been severely pruned back, and so far it's been living for 2 or 3 years in a pot which is hidden. And these planters are actually made from either insulating foam or florist's foam, and I take a hot knife and cut out the central part, put a piece of fiberglass window screen on the bottom, attach it from the bottom, and that way the water's able to drain through and still keep with potting soil, it keeps the plants fairly moist. And a lot of the plants are artificial too. I've kind of go through the floral section of various craft stores, and if anything looks like it's got the right sort of leaf size, or it suggests something, even if it isn't exactly the right size. So this is all plastic.
Oh, wow.
This is plastic. And I usually give them a shot of camouflage green paint because it helps ward off the UV, which will definitely eat plastic. The railroad was actually built around the pre-existing trees, and because everything was full of roots from both the trees and from some of the shrubs. The big shrubs were all pre-existing. I trimmed them back violently when I built the railroad, and then let them grow up around the railroad to make view blocks so that the train appears to be going somewhere, it disappears and reappears. And before we lived here, we lived for 25 years up in Humboldt County, and the house came with a deck, but it rotted. And while we hired a sort of a family friend to come in, it was a carpenter, and rebuild the deck, and I looked at the way he built the deck, and when I came here, I saw this. I said, why don't I just build a deck? And so what we have, it's hard to see because it's all grown in, which I've tried very hard to do, but we have pier blocks, typical for building a deck, and then we have 4x4, which is this particular pier block has a steel strap coming up out of it, and you put the 4x4 on it, and then drive some screws in, and you now have a very solid base. You don't have to worry about digging holes. You don't have to worry about where the sprinkler system is, or the tree roots. And I took one look at this tree, and I said, "Am I going to dig through those roots?" And it's worked out very well. You level the site as best you can. You can either add on by piling gravel up, or dig down and level it out. But you can also, even if it's not perfectly level, you can adjust the angle of the 4x4 with shims. And I've gone to a fair amount of trouble to paint the cement and to paint the 4x4s so that they will disappear. If there's any shade at all, you can't see them. This is my own innovation. This is an off-cut 4x4, and there's a couple steel straps that attach it to an upright, and this allows you to get behind the layout, like so. So all this for maintenance and adjustment of things and the inevitable plant matter. I don't have to go back there often. The railroad is purposely shallow. I mean, you give up some things, the buildings tend to be kind of narrow. and the space is limited, but with a few tricks and a little imagination, you can make it fit and get the effect you want. Even the harbor scene, the buildings, although they're actually were kitbashed from some buildings that were 1 to 24 scale, I used the upper story windows and to make it appear smaller and hence more distant. And the colors are muted so that it looks like there's a little bit of distance between you. It's not, the yellow and deep brown, but it's a series of grays. And most of the buildings are scratch built. I think the waterfront and the Green Hotel down there at the end, I won in a raffle at a baggers meeting.
Oh.
And everything else is scratch built. Except that's a kit that hasn't been issued for like 20 years. I found it unbuilt secondhand and built it up and used that as the yard office. That's the mailbox from where we used to live up on the north coast. The post office department replaced them, and so I kept it. And then one day I said, I need something to shelter a locomotive so I can just walk out, even if it's raining, which it did a lot there, and just run a train. And so the locomotive was sheltered the rest of the time, and it's quite waterproof. And it's sort of, it looks a little out of place now because everything else looks a bit more scale, but I have plans for an engine repair facility to go there, and we'll see when and if that gets built. I got tired of these little details going missing, and so I took broke the edges of a piece of cement board, and then just glued them on and put in some weeds, and then this was a piece of track this is actually real steel rail. You can knock a sign over, put it back up, take it off. Little niobium magnet, niobium or whatever it is, and a piece of metal in the sign, a piece of metal in the railroad. I tend to alter everything I can get that comes into my grip. I mean, I don't really want to have what everybody else has, and I've always grown up with the idea that if you have a railroad, it has a name, and you have your name on at least some of the rolling stock. And so that's always about the first thing. I buy something, it gets a coat of the appropriate spray paint, and then it gets Lodi and Western letters on it, and a number, and then we go from there. This is one of the workhorses of my railroad. I saw a picture on a calendar. Tom York had put out this calendar of small locomotives and things, and a locomotive that looks almost but not quite exactly like this worked for down in Central America. And then it was repatriated, and it worked for Celotex in Louisiana, and it ended up in a gravel quarry in Georgia. And it really appealed to me, so I bought a Heartland Mighty Mac, took the top off, added a little bit more beefier end beams and couplers, and then took the cab, cut it in half, and made it bigger by putting plastruct sides on it and a plastruct roof. And it runs off a 4-pack of AA batteries, which are rechargeable. And this is pretty typical. I've had this for a long time. I'm very happy with the current paint job. I've gradually, changed the paint, added details. I soldered up a few pieces of brass wire and made the Oh, grab irons and the railings and things like that. And it operates very simply. It goes in one direction. If you push the stack, you pull the stack up and it's neutral, and then you pull it up more and it goes forward. And that's the way I like it. The speed is adjusted by exactly how many batteries I put in it, and then that's the speed it goes. It's like a good narrow gauge, short line railroad type speed. Nobody's trying to set a world record. Everybody's just trying to get the stuff there and keep it on the track. And so the trains run fairly slowly. This was a kit by American model builders, and very simply a 4-pack of batteries just fit inside the hood. And so I hooked up a double pull, double throw reversing switch, and this has gone through various configurations, but you can reach it from outside. And it's been through various coats of paint and quite a bit of weathering, some of it purposeful, some of it just happened. Yeah. You leave it out long enough and it gets pretty dirty. This is a new generation of Mammoth locomotives. It doesn't have an oscillating cylinder. It has there's a valve and a slip eccentric. It's single cylinder. The gas tank is up here. Pressure gauge. This is how you usually start it or reverse it, is by this. And it has a sight glass which you can blow down, so that if you get bubbles in it, you just give it a little twist and you can get the bubbles out of your sight glass. And then when the run is over, you just open the valve and exhaust all the steam from the boiler so it doesn't draw oil back in. And the lubricator is integrated up into the cylinder block. And it actually was a much more basic looking locomotive when I bought it, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with it when I bought it, but I knew I wanted to change it to either a steam dummy or something else. And then I collected off of the internet. I collected a lot of pictures of vertical boiler locomotives, both European and American, and finally came up with this. This was left over from a Bachmann 10-wheeler that fell off my dentist's overhead railway. There was an earthquake and it went to its death. And I took the pieces, and that's yeah. That actually is the pilot of that 10-wheeler, and this is the roof, and that becomes the roof for this locomotive.
And so, tell us about this one.
This is German. It's a Regner. It's called an overtype. That's because the cylinder sits up on top of the boiler, and it's a single oscillating cylinder. You have to start it by giving it a tweak, and it has all the usual controls: gas valve and a throttle. And this is the reverser. Move it to one direction or the other. Oh, wow. And in my fantasy about this is that it was actually made for my railroad by a local company, which everybody now knows as Caterpillar, but it started off as the Holt Manufacturing Company, and it made steam tractors that looked just like this, except that they had tractor wheels instead. And so I thought, well, why wouldn't this local railroad go to Holt and say, hey, why don't you build me a steam locomotive? And so that's my story. This is the result. I've gotten more compliments on this caboose than on, I think, anything I've built. And and at one point I decided to do full interior. I'm, basically a model railroader, but the people that it turns out in the hobby that I've really loved have been artists. And so I've started looking at it or thinking about it more from the point of view of an art project. One thing that was impressed on me by some of these artist model railroaders was to keep it consistent across across your railroad. The palette of colors, the atmosphere that you're trying to project. And atmosphere is one of the things that I think I'm trying to project in the railroad, is a certain place, a certain time, and the feeling of that sort of when railroads were much more on everybody's mind. They're actually probably more important today than ever, but people are no longer have them in their face. And when they do, they're not happy, I discovered. A lot of the same colors are repeated over and over again, and occasional accents, but I guess it's just, and it's worked out very well. It's, once again, you make a choice and then it informs your day-to-day decisions. What shall I paint it? Well, we'll paint it one of these colors, and we say, well, that's enough of that, so I'll paint one that's blue or one that's white, or one, and I eventually decided to go with the color scheme of the yellow and brown that the Rio Grande and the Southern Pacific and others have used for the railroad buildings. But other things tend to stay the same, too. The railroad, most of the time, just runs. It's a scenic thing. You open a beer, put your feet up, and watch the train go by. But I designed it so that it can be operated in the sense of moving a car from the yard to a destination and picking up, bringing out loads and bringing in empties. And there's also the feature of being able to sort of seasonally operate things like the grape harvest and the trains for the sugar beet harvest, and those are handled differently than if you're taking a train out and picking up cars from, say, the harbor, or dropping them off to be loaded with sugar, bags of sugar or something like that. The thing is that if you have the ability to operate the railroad, it starts to look more like a real railroad. If you have a railroad that you're gonna have 3 circles of track running or something like that, there's something missing, and that is these cars sitting on sidings waiting to be moved, and yards where the cars can be switched so the locomotive can get on the right end of which one, and it takes away from the railroad atmosphere, I think. So I'm glad that I put in all the switches and so forth, and after doing HON scale, HO scale, ON3, the people go, oh, well, the switches are fussy and stuff. Are you kidding? You ever try to do it when it's about this big? This is a piece of cake. This is like the real thing, except you don't have to worry about dropping a piece of 55-pound rail on your foot or something. If you connect with real railroads as well as what's available physically in our scale and gauge and so forth, you might get an idea of something that interests you, and you can have a theme to what you're doing, a direction. And I think that it actually makes decision-making a lot simpler. You don't get this one of everything and not very much of anything sort of syndrome, and you go, well, shall I buy this or shall I buy that? Well, if you have a direction, I'm going to model a railroad that's in such and such a part of the world that does this and that. Suddenly you got focus. You go, okay, well, I don't have to worry about that, and maybe I can find something that's in my line. And then if you get interested, if you have any interest in real railroads, then you can get interested in the history. So And on the other hand, if you're interested in contemporary railroads, you can start going, well, where can I see, how does this thing work? How do they really look? Do I see in the real world of trains that I would like to have in my backyard? Mm-hmm. And so there's these, I would say that start doing research in both what's available and then all those possibilities out there of which ones do you want and which ones don't you want. I'm sure you can have everything, but why? You can only run one or two trains, successfully, and at a time at least. And so that's why I think I'm happy with what I have. It's like I've been up and down the road a few times, and it's sort of like, well, I don't want that. I don't need that. This is trouble. Whenever I've done it, it's not worked out well. So we won't do that again. We'll do this, and keep it, simplify it a little bit, just to find focus.
Well, that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned something new you can put to use on your own railroad. Remember, next year Sacramento is hosting the National Guard Railroad Convention. I do hope you'll make it out for that. It's June 18 to 21. You can register at ngrc2025.org. If you haven't been to a national convention before, they really are worthwhile. You can go to layout tours every day. There are clinics, the vendor hall, various social gatherings. You can visit local area museums and attractions, sometimes with extended hours. I've been to several conventions, so they've always been worth it. They've always been a great experience. I'll be traveling from out of town for this one, and I really hope to see you there as well. Also, please like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I do have one more layout tour that I'll be releasing here in the coming weeks or months. I'm editing that one now, and hope to see you down in the comment section below as well. Thanks, everyone.